The images of Election Day 2022 were much the same as any other that had preceded it.
Are you a superstitious man?
No, not really.
Shots of the leaders voting, their final comments.
This election has never been about me or my feelings or anything like that. It's always been about the Australian people.
The way that you change the country is to change the government.
But even the political hardheads in the major parties really weren't sure exactly what was going to happen on Saturday night. There was a collective loss of confidence that they knew exactly what was on voters' minds.
Voting is now closing on the East Coast.
The early results are coming in.
Published polls were pointing to a big Labor win. But both the presence of independents running in seats across the country and focus groups reflecting both a visceral dislike of the Prime Minister but a prevarication about Labor and its leader meant it was going to be a different election from most.
You said it was going to be messy. I tell you what, that early stuff's messy, numbers everywhere.
The tradition of changes of government coming with a landslide victory was about to be smashed. There was indeed a mood for change abroad, but it wasn't your standard mood for change to the other side of politics.
There's a big vote there with others. There seems to be a lot of vote for independents scattered all across many seats.
They are looking for alternatives to the major parties, and they want their vote to count.
The mood for change this time saw millions of voters decisively abandon the major parties and, as a result, transform our politics. That mood has also changed the makeup of the parliament. There is a chance that Labor may have to form a minority government. In 2010, Australians discovered that they had accidentally voted for a parliament where each side of politics had 72 MPs and the balance of power rested in the hands of just a few crossbenchers. They were unnerved by the sense of instability fomented by an aggressive opposition leader who thought he could bring the Gillard government down on the floor of the parliament. But this time around, voters, particularly the female voters who are the significant factor in this tectonic shift in voting patterns, were more than happy to see new forces at work in Canberra.
Well, they made up their mind that they weren't going to do what they were told to do by male leaders of the respective parties. They made up their minds to act in their own best interests.
John Black is a former Labor senator from Queensland who now runs a demographic and political profiling company.
The Teal voters, much like the women they elected, are professional women. They live in the wealthiest suburbs in the country. They started to lose faith in the Liberal Party about 20 years or so ago as the Liberal Party was focusing more on pinching blue-collar men from Labor. At the time they were derided as doctors' wives, when in fact it's the doctors.
When the new Prime Minister was sworn in by Governor-General David Hurley today, he had Finance Minister Katie Gallagher also sworn in as Minister for Women. It was recognition of the crucial role women played in the election outcome, both as candidates and as voters.
They're people who pay a lot of tax. They've often run a small business. They'll be running perhaps an accounting firm or running their own doctor's surgery or running a law firm or in a senior position.
Labor believes it is still likely to have the numbers to form a majority government. And after a decade in the wilderness, there was much cause for celebration on Saturday, both for the party and its agenda.
Tonight, the Australian people have voted for change. And together, we can embrace the Uluru Statement from the Heart.
The Albanese government will govern at best with a 1 or 2 seat majority, as Scott Morrison did. It will have the political task of tacking to the political centre, rather than the right, both to succeed in the parliament and to try to win back some voters and recreate a more solid base of its own by the time the 2025 election rolls around, as will the coalition. And those pressures on both sides to shift will reflect the change in the political geography of Australia's major cities that also occurred on Saturday night. In Brisbane, both major parties have lost to the Greens, but the change in the colours of the electorate map there are nothing compared to other cities. In the heart of Melbourne, previously Liberal seats have now been painted Labor red or Independent teal, a move also reflected in Sydney. Most stunning though, even to Labor, was the sea of red that has washed over Perth, where it picked up 4 seats from the Liberals, while Independent Kate Chaney picked up a 5th. Labor ran a completely separate campaign in the West, complete with a separate slogan. It built on the hostility voters there had to a Prime Minister who they felt had attacked them as cave dwellers because they supported their closed borders.
Only Labor will stand up for WA.
It's like that movie in The Croods. People wanted to stay in the cave, some wanted to stay in the cave.
And backed Clive Palmer in his High Court challenge to those closed borders. Until Saturday, Anne Ali held the most marginal seat in Western Australia for Labor. She's now on a margin of 10%.
When Clive Palmer challenged WA's borders, he was dealing with an incredibly popular Premier who had made incredibly popular decisions to protect West Australians. The fact that Scott Morrison then chose to side with Clive Palmer in challenging Mark McGowan and those decisions really put people in Western Australia off.
That points to a somewhat overlooked factor in the election. COVID did ultimately have a big effect. The woman who vanquished Treasurer Josh Frydenberg in the seat of Kooyong, Monique Ryan, says his loss was in part driven by anger in Victoria over what were seen as his partisan attacks on the state government and a sense of abandonment by the federal government. And Anne Ali says ceding responsibility to the states for much of COVID management played out badly in the West too.
Watching that play out, it appeared that it was a matter of if things go wrong, we can blame the states. Now, of course, in the states, things didn't go wrong. They went incredibly well and elevated the premiers in the state to these leadership status that was created by a void in federal leadership. So it backfired on Scott Morrison.
The 2022 election is also a story of once ultra-safe seats that have become marginal and savage swings against sitting members. The swing against Scott Morrison in his own seat of Cook was almost 60% bigger than the one that unseated John Howard in Bennelong in 2007. All up, the coalition has been shattered by this election. Frontbenchers from the Treasurer down have lost their seats. Appeasing the Nationals has cost the Liberals their traditional base. Liberals outside Queensland are now outnumbered in the joint party room by MPs from the Nationals and the Queensland LNP. Labor also has to think about how it rebuilds its primary vote. But for now, our new Prime Minister has more immediate things on his mind. The pressing tensions of the world at large saw Anthony Albanese and his Foreign Minister Senator Penny Wong head for Tokyo and a meeting with leaders from the United States, Japan and India, even before the election outcome is finalised. The Labor caucus will meet for the first time on Tuesday and the rest of the ministry will be sworn in. There is talk of a parliamentary sitting next month. The new government's economic team has started work on an October budget. There is pressure for early action on climate change and the establishment of an anti-corruption commission, and particularly on an Indigenous voice to Parliament, all issues which we have heard little about for some years.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 7:30's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.